Good evening, all the joinees. Hi, this is Ansu. I welcome you all to the webinar conducted by NGEN Markets. By the time the others join in, let's have a look at today's webinar topic. So, today we would be majorly focusing on the mutual fund holding analysis. Firstly, we would be looking upon the trend of holding of mutual funds into various sectors, along with that their holdings into various stocks month on month, what has the changes that has happened. Followed by that, we would be loading a fund in a new tab, a individual tab, wherein we would be looking upon the individual fund's asset allocation and the trend of its holding for the past 12 months. Followed by that, we would be looking upon a dynamic daily NAV report that you could generate from our platform. And finally, the quorum would be open for a Q&A session. You could either unmute yourself or type down your questions in the chat box. So let us begin. So this is our NGEN Markets landing page, which is the Markets tab. For our topic related webinar, I'll move towards the Funds tab. When you move towards the Funds tab, the first section or the first tab that opens up is the Screener section. Now, our topic related section would be the Holding Analysis, which happens to be the fifth tab. So once you go to this holding analysis, this now lets you see the trend of investment of mutual funds into various sectors, or for that matter, various stocks. Here, there are in total 4 tabs that you can come across within the holding analysis. First is the sector changes, followed by is the stock changes. Next is the equity holdings tab, and is the debt holdings tab. We would be looking upon each tab in detail. I would start off with the sector changes tab. Now, as the name suggests, this sector changes tab lets us see the trend of investment of mutual funds into various sectors. Now, there are certain details that you could view onto this page. Let's start off with this first section, which is mentioned as check funds with asset class. So you can select your respective asset class and see the investments of those asset class mutual funds into various sectors. By default, equity as an asset class gets selected. You could click on this drop down to view a different asset class as well. Next to that, the second column that you see is typically the sectors column, which lets us see what all are the SEBI classified sectors into which mutual funds, SEBI classified mutual funds, are making their investment. Next to that, the following columns, the following 12 columns that you come across, you can see that highlighting the column heading happens to be a specific month end date. So these are the month end holdings for each of the fund into various sectors. Latest holding data would anytime be available on this right hand side. So you could view the latest holding as of 31st Jan 2025 on the extreme right hand side. So the update frequency of our holding analysis is 8th to 13th of the month. So by 14th of the next month, you would be able to see the latest holding for the month of Feb. Currently, you can see the latest holding as of Jan 2025 in this specific column. Next to that, the first row that you come across is mentioned as number of funds under consideration. What are the total number of funds whose investment trends that we are looking upon? In every column, you could see that the number of funds vary typically because there are NFOs that are coming in as well, and funds change their holdings on a month on month basis. So, as of our latest month, which is Jan 2025, we see that there are a total of 881 funds, which is our universe of equity as an asset class mutual funds. So currently, we would be viewing the trend of investments of 881 equity mutual funds only. Now, how do you read any of these data that you see on this style like structure? For example, let's say I try to locate this banks as a sector and the latest holding into banks as a sector by coming to this Jan 2025 section. So it mentions as 21.39%. suggesting that 21.39% of AUM of all the equity mutual funds have invested into banks as a sector. Now, you want to know which all are the mutual funds that are investing into banks as a sector. All you need to do is click on this tile and it will give you list of the mutual funds. So you can see out of 881, which is our universe of equity mutual funds, there are a total of 641 mutual funds that are investing into banks as a sector. Once you scroll down, you could see the list of those many funds. Next to the name of the fund, you could view their percentage holding as well as their amount in crore. In top, you could see the highest allocation into banks as a sector comes in through bank ETF, or for that matter bank index fund, typically because they would invest in only banking stocks per se. Once you scroll down, you would be able to see other funds such as HDFC Focus 30 fund. It holds 34.8% into banks as a sector, which is equivalent to 5,460 odd crores in terms of rupees. This data of holding, which shows the name as well as the percentage and the amount, can be instantly downloaded into an Excel format. You can click on this and an Excel report for the same gets generated. Now, this is the data that we understood just by clicking on the tile, which was as of Jan 2025. As I mentioned, this section also shows you the trend of investments, and that is exactly denoted by the colors that you see. So there are two colors that you could view. First is green, which says that in comparison to the previous month, there has been an increase in terms of investment. Followed by that, the second color is pink, which says that in comparison to the previous month, there has been a reduction in terms of investment. So if at all we look upon banks as a sector, in comparison to December 2024, as of Jan 2025, funds have increased their stakes into banks as a sector. And in a similar way, if we look upon IT software as a sector, in comparison to December 2024, funds, equity funds have reduced their stake into IT software as a sector. Now, currently, the trend that we were viewing was for all or entire equity as an asset class, which took into consideration 881 funds. Now, let's say you rather want to shorten this universe of funds to maybe a specific SEBI category only. We also have an option to filter funds basis your SEBI category. You can click right here in this equity category search box. Once you do that, all the categories that come under equity as an asset class would show up. You could simply search for your respective category. Let's say now I wish to focus on the investment trends of mid cap funds only. So I have searched for the same. And here you could see a striking difference in terms of the number of funds that is under consideration. From 881, we have now come down to 30 funds only, which are specifically mid-cap funds from equity as an asset class. Now, here again, the data reads exactly the same. For example, 9.38% as of Jan 2025, saying that 9.38% of all the mid-cap funds have invested into IT software as a sector, which gets highlighted in this second column. Again, if you click on that tile, it can give you list of mid-cap funds that have made investment, the percentage, as well as the corresponding amount as well. And since this is a trend analysis, you could view this trend analysis for the past 12 months in history. Now here, if at all we try to look upon this data, which is IT software as a sector, post 31st May 2024, mid-cap funds have rather increased their stake into IT software as a sector. From 5.39, it has kept on increasing its stake into this sector, which is currently at 9.38%, suggesting that mid-cap funds are rather bullish towards IT software as a sector. Whereas if at all we look upon auto ancillary as a sector, post June 2024, mid-cap funds have indeed reduced their stake into auto ancillary as a sector. From 5.32, the holdings have reduced and come down now to 3.63%. So whereas we saw IT software, the stake were increasing, in auto ancillary, they are reducing their stake that way. Right? So this was the sector changes that we looked upon on a month-on-month basis. What are the difference or trends in allocations of holdings of mutual funds into various sectors, which can also be shortlisted basis the SEBI category. Next to that, we have this stock changes as an option, which now shows in a similar way as to sector changes. In stock changes, it would show the list of mutual funds and their trends of holding into various stocks. Here as well, the first option is check fund with asset class. You see equity is the asset class that gets selected by default. You could click on this drop down to select any other respective asset class as well. The first column that you could see right here is the list of stocks into which mutual funds are making investment. You can sort this list of stocks basis the market capitalization, which is highlighted right here. Large cap as a market cap gets selected by default. You could click on this drop down to select between either large, mid, or small cap stocks. Next to that, here as well, the data reads in a similar way. Latest data, anytime being available on the right hand side. You could view, it says currently for HDFC Bank as a stock, it says 8.60% of all the equity mutual funds are holding into this specific stock. You could click on that tile and it gives you list of stocks, list of mutual funds that are holding into HDFC Bank as a stock. So it says 453 is the total list of mutual funds that are holding into HDFC Bank as a stock. You could view the list of those mutual funds. You could view their percentage as well as amount in crore. In along and also along with these two columns, there is another one extra parameter that you could view right here is the shares. What are the corresponding shares for this respective stock that are held by each of these mutual funds? And this data as well, you could download it in Excel format as well. Here as well, as I mentioned, trend analysis is what you can see. Pink suggesting reduction in terms of investment in comparison to the previous month, and green suggesting a increase in terms of investment in comparison to the previous month. In addition to these data, there is also something called as show fund counts. Once you activate this show fund counts, in that respective month, what number of mutual funds are holding onto that respective stocks also come up. So you can see 418 are the funds that are holding into Infosys, which comes up to be 5.80% of the entire average holdings of these funds. Currently, these data that we are looking in form of percentage that gets selected by default can also be viewed in terms of values, which is amount invested in crore, and as well you could view this in terms of shares which are held in lakh. And since we had activated this show fund count, irrespective of any of these three toggle option that you go on, the fund count will come up unless and until you deactivate it. So this was our stock changes section that we looked upon. Next, what we have is this equity holding as an option. So this says, or rather is a section wherein you could simply do a quick search of a specific stock and view which all other mutual funds that are holding on to a respective stock. For example, you quickly want to know what all other mutual funds may be holding into Zomato as a stock. You search for the name, type in Zomato right here, and it gives you list of mutual funds. So let's say I maybe try to locate Kalyan Jewelers. So you search for it and you get a list of mutual funds. So it says that there are a total of 5,500 crore that is invested by 103 funds into Kalyan Jewelers as a stock. Right? Here, the first column shows you the list of mutual funds that are holding Kalyan Jewelers in its portfolio. Followed by that, there are in total 6 columns that you could view. I would highlight the first 3 columns initially. First 3 are holding percentage, fund AUM, and holding in crore. Now, holding percentage typically says what percent of this fund holds Kalyan Jewellers currently. So for Motilal Oswal, it says 7.32% of Motilal Oswal Flexi Caps portfolio is held into Kalyan Jewellers as a stock. The next column shows you the fund's total AUM. So Motilal Oswal Flexi Cap has a total AUM of 11,800 crore. And the third column shows you the holding in crore. Out of these 11,800 crore, 867 crore are put into Kalyan Jewellers as a stock. Now, how do you arrive at this holding in crore? That is simply multiplication of this holdings into the total funds AUM. Out of these total fund, 7.32%, which comes up to 867 crore, is put into Kalyan Jewellers as a stock. The further three columns that you come across is 1 month, 6 month and 1 year. So these are the returns which are specific to each of these funds. For example, this return of 5.65, a 6 months return of 5.65 is a return of Motilal Oswal Multicap Fund for 6 months period. And in a similar way, let's say a 1 month return of negative 8.10 percentage is a 1 month return respective to this fund, which is Motilal Oswal Mid Cap Fund. So these returns column that you see are specific to the funds that are mentioned right here. After equity holding, we have this debt holdings as an option. So in a similar way, as you search for a stock, a direct stock, you come to this section, type in the name of that respective stock, and you get a list of mutual funds that hold on to that stock. Similarly, in debt holding, you could search in a name of a specific debt security that is held by a specific mutual fund. For example, let's say maybe I try to locate a certificate of deposit of Bank of India. You can either type in the name of that debt security. If not, you could also input the ISIN number as well. Once you do that, in a similar way, you get a list of mutual funds that have that specific debt security in its portfolio, and the further columns remains the same, which is holding, fund AUM, holding in crore, and the returns. The additional column that you view right here is the ratings, which is associated to each of these debt securities that you're looking for. And all of these data, be it in the holdings data or debt holdings, you could download this in an Excel format. Just by clicking on this, the data gets downloaded in an Excel format. Now, this was the holding analysis that we looked upon, let's say on a sectoral level or maybe on a stock level. Now, next, further towards the topic, we would be looking upon the holdings of mutual funds, the entire portfolio of a specific fund. So for that, let's say I search for a fund in this search fund box. So I'll add, let's say, a Nippon Growth Fund. I'll search for it and I'll click on it and it opens up in a new page. So once you search for it, the first tab that gets opened up by default would be the fund performance. You can go to the asset allocation tab to view the portfolio of a specific fund. In the asset allocation, the first tab that opens up is the overviews tab, which firstly lets you see the asset allocation of the entire fund, which typically will show you if there are any debt or equity holdings, there are any cash positions. That is something that you could view on this left hand side. And after that, you could view in this smaller box the total holdings of this fund, which would be as of the latest date. We also mentioned the date right here, which has been mentioned as 31st Jan 2025. So as I initially highlighted, our holding cycle runs, or our update cycle for these holdings runs from 8th to 13th of the month. So by 14th, you would be able to see the latest data. Now, what are the columns that you could view right here? Firstly, what are the securities? Typically, what are the stock underlyings in the fund's portfolio? Followed by that, what is the market cap of that respective stock? And next to that, what percent of the fund is held by this respective stock? So next to the name of the stock, you could view its allocation in the fund's portfolio. post overviews tab, we have this position changes by month, which now says in comparison to the previous month, which is December 2024, what are the changes that has been done in the funds portfolio. So what all are the things that you could view right here? Firstly, you can see the largest increase that has happened. You could view the largest decrease that has happened. You can also view new positions that have been added. Also, any position that have been removed. So let's say we look upon the largest increase. It says that the largest increase has come in the form of AU Small Finance Bank, which has increased by 0.44%. And here we show the top 10 largest increases that has happened for this funds portfolio in comparison to the previous month. And in a similar way, we also show what are the top 10 largest decreases. So in terms of the highest decrease that has happened, it has came in from Voltas as a stock. There has been a reduction to an extent of 0.40%. And in addition to that, it also highlights what are the new positions that have been added. So currently, HPCL is something that has been added to this funds portfolio. And along with that, these are the 4 stocks that has been removed from the funds portfolio per se. Now, as I mentioned, this analysis is shown in comparison to the previous month's performance or previous month's holding. You could view this analysis for the past 12 months on this basis, which says position changes by month. So let's say if I select 31st August right here, so it will show you in comparison to July 2024, what is the largest increase, largest decrease, positions added and removed. You can do this analysis for the past 12 months in the history. Now, what we viewed right now was changes on a month-on-month basis. What we also have is this position over time, which now says that for a time period which is 12 months in past, we show you the data for the past 12 months and the changes that have happened during the past 12 months. So here the second column that you see shows you the list of securities, meaning the stocks or the debt underlyings if there are any. Followed by that, you could view the sectors which are respective to each of these stocks. And the following columns would be the holdings as on the end date. So you see here again, the month end date comes up. Latest data would be the third or the fourth column. Next to the sectors column, you would view the latest data, which is as of 31st Jan 2025. So here as well, you can just click on this column heading to arrange your data either in an ascending or descending order. If not, this can also be arranged in an alphabetical order as well. Right? So for example, how do you read any of this data? Let's say I maybe look upon AU Small Finance as a bank. So it says that as of December 2024, this fund this fund had this stock to an extent of 1.31%, which as of the latest month, which is January 2025, has increased to 1.75. Of course, just by looking at the figure, you could understand that there has been an increase in terms of percentage, but here as well, we have given in a color. So green says there has been an increase in terms of percentage, and red says there has been a reduction in terms of percentage. Right? This is how you read these data. Now, there are also an option wherein you could try to identify whether the increase has happened due to the change in price of a respective stock or due to the change in the stocks, meaning the underlying stocks, whether the stocks have been purchased or whether it has been sold or not. So for example, let's say I look upon Bank of India as a stock, which is a part of this funds portfolio. So it says that in consideration to December 2024, the holdings percentage was to an extent of 0.42, which has now come up to 0.49. Now, this change, whether it has happened due to the shares difference or due to the change in price of that respective stock, in order to identify that, you could click on this drop down section that is available, which gives you an option called as shares in lakhs. Right, so once you come here, let's say I again sort this basis the alphabetical order, and I would look for Bank of India. Right, so here you see the number of shares, which is 145 lakh. This has remained the same or remained the constant for the past 6 months. So, what we observed, the change in percentage would typically have happened because the price of this respective stock would have fluctuated. We could also verify that. I'll just click on the name of this stock. It opens up in a new page, which is now a stock level analysis that you could look upon. Since I just want only the stock movement, stock price movement, I'll just deselect this benchmark, which is Nifty 50, and I'll try to zoom in. I'll drag and drop, and I'll try to zoom in December to Jan time period. Right. So somewhere here, yeah, you see the price as on 2nd December 2020 is 110, and maybe I just try to locate as of 31st Jan, you see it has increased to 112. So here the price of this respective stock has increased, and because of that, the percentage change could be justified because the shares have anytime remained the same. The changes typically happened because the price of that respective stock fluctuated. Now, currently, this data that we are viewing is by a single security. You could also view this data by sector as well. We have a toggle button as by sector. So, on a sectoral level, on a month on month basis, what are the changes that has happened as well can also be seen. So, here it says as of 31st Jan 2025, Nippon Growth Fund has highest allocation into finance as a sector, which is to an extent of 9.79%. Now, in this sector, which all are the stocks that have the highest exposure? If you also wish to view that, we have a separate tab for that, which is equity sectors. Once you go to that section, this shows you the top 10 equity sectors that form a part of this fund's portfolio. You could click on that bar graph. So I just simply clicked on finance as a bar graph. And in that sector, it is showing that these all are the funds that have exposure towards this funds portfolio. Power Fin Corporation happens to have the highest exposure, which is to an extent of 2.56%. So this was rather for an equity funds asset allocation or the overview that we looked upon. Maybe we also try to look upon the portfolio of maybe a hybrid fund. So let's say I search for maybe ICICI Balanced Advantage Fund. And we try to locate or look upon how does the portfolio of that specific hybrid fund looks like. So this is the fund that I have opened up. I go to the second tab, which is the asset allocation. And here in the overviews tab, by default, what you could view is the net equity position for any of the hybrid fund. Now, what do I mean by equity position? So these are the funds, balanced advantage or hybrid funds. These are the funds that have like short positions, arbitrage positions in its portfolio. So here you could clearly see that it says that there are a total of 45 equity shorts, which comes up to be 10.63%. So basis these equity short positions, we have by default, it gets selected as apply. So once you apply this, what you could view would be the net equity positions. If you wish to view the gross equity positions, all you need to do would be untick this apply as an option, and you will be able to see the gross equity position. So this is how the portfolio of an arbitrage fund or a BAF would look like. By default, you would be able to see the net equity positions. If you wish to view the gross equity positions, you need to uncheck this apply shorts as an option. And here as well, you could view the long position for each of the stock that is there in the funds portfolio, as well as its short positions just beneath it. Initially, the short positions used to be at the very bottom. Based upon feedbacks taken up from our clients, currently we have come up with the placing just next to the long positions. And in a similar way, we looked upon position changes by month and position over time for that equity fund. Here as well, the details remain the same. In comparison to the previous month, what are the changes? What is the trend that has happened in the portfolio of a specific fund is what we show. And this as well, you can download it in an Excel format. So all the tabs that you go on, there are options to download data in an Excel format. Now, once this is done, our last topic for the day, for that, I again go back to the funds section. In the funds section, we have this reports option, which is the second last tab. So this is the section wherein you could generate daily MF performance report. You could either come onto the platform, click on this Excel download option and get the daily NAV report. If not, you could also subscribe to these reports just by clicking on this plus icon. So there are two options. You could either subscribe to the regular funds or direct funds as per your requirement. Now, how do these NAV reports look like? I'll just download this. So once you subscribe to any of these reports, these get delivered onto your registered mail ID that you view right here, your registered mail ID with NGEN. You will receive it on that mail ID around 11 to 11:30. Now, once you open that Excel sheet, this is how it would look like. Firstly, it is the asset class that you come across. Next, in the asset class, you could view their SEBI classification, their SEBI category. You just need to click on a respective category. And in that category, you get to see what all are the funds, what are their daily NAV movements, and other parameters, which are volatility, Sharpe, return specific parameters once you scroll towards the right. And followed by that, you can also view their holdings as well, large, mid, and small cap, letting you see the portfolio split of each of these funds in terms of its large, mid, and small cap. So that is it for the topic related webinar. If anyone has any questions or queries, you could either unmute yourself or type down your questions in the chat box.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a query. Sorry, I joined in a little late.
Hmm.
So this analysis we were doing on a fund level, right? We choose a particular fund and we see
Correct.
what is contributing in that fund. Can you just help me with one fund, for example, say like, say HDFC Dividend TE Fund?
Okay.
So market's taken a big cut. So this fund is also taken a big cut. So how did you say we approach to see which is the major pullback in this fund or which has contributed maximum to the
Uh,
down of the.
Sure. So once you load a fund, maybe in the asset allocation, you could go to the position over time, as I mentioned. Position over time will show you on a month-on-month basis how has the changes happened in terms of the fund's holding per se, right? So maybe if we try to locate in comparison to the previous 2 or 3 months, if at all we see yeah, so I think towards Infosys, they have increased their stake. You see, from October 2024, which was to an extent of 2.87%, they have now come up to 3.14 percentage. So they have increased their stake into this respective stock. So in a similar way, you can also try to identify right here from this list of their holdings, how has the trend or how has their movement taken place from previous 12 months, or let's say you wish to analyze maybe the previous 6 months as well. You could try to do that. So here we identified that they have rather increased their stake. It was initially higher in Infosys as a stock as of August 2024. It was to an extent of 3.13. However, in the following months, they indeed reduced their stocks, and again, they indeed reduced their holdings into this stock, and again, they increased their holdings into this stock.
So you were talking about how what gives the biggest pull down for these stocks. That information, where do we particularly go and check?
Uh,
Yes, actually, normally what happens is that since this all the mutual fund schemes, the equity schemes, they hold stocks. We need to identify which stocks are actually that did not perform over the last, say, because of the performance which has come down. You have to focus and find out that which are the
Is
stocks that
there a
has
tab here
contributed.
that will help us to identify that or kind of come to see that?
Yes, sure. So, what you could do is you could go to the fund section and the holding analysis. So, here, as I highlighted in the sector changes, you could load in a specific category. You were looking upon a fund, maybe you can load in that category itself, right? So, I load in, let's say, dividend yield as a category. So this that way can be a starting point. So here you see that into IT software as a sector, what data that we saw in that respective fund, here as well we are able to see the same data that it had increased the allocation and currently it is reducing the allocation. So in a similar way, holding analysis and a single funds analysis together you can use and view how has the changes happened that way.
So when we put a portfolio with 4 or 5 funds, we are able to see a tab called contribution, which says which fund contributes towards the portfolio and which fund is pulling out from the portfolio. In a
Uh,
similar way, when you see a funds analysis, is there a place where you can see a contribution to see in the top allocations what is contributing towards the funds or what is pulling out from the funds? Is it possible to see?
Correct. So, what you are asking for is rather an attribution analysis, right, on a specific fund. We currently do not show attribution analysis because what data that any data that we have is typically the month end holdings only. However, the changes in the portfolio of any of a fund happens on a daily basis. That data is not publicly available, and hence we do not also show that because based on month end holdings only you cannot specifically determine or give a statement that this stock contributed the maximum, this stock contributed the least. So for that reason we do not have attribution analysis on the platform. We anytime have the month end holdings of each of these funds.
I don't know the difference between an attribution and contribution, but when a portfolio is there, there is a tab called contribution.
Correct. Correct.
So the similar angle I'm trying to look at for an individual fund.
Right. So that is what I mentioned. For a fund, since month end holdings data is what is publicly available, attribution analysis that way, any other platform shows it on a month end basis only. We do not consider that to be a correct way of showing the change or showing the attribution of any stock's contribution towards the change in the portfolio of a specific fund. So we do not currently have attribution tab in a specific fund. Contribution tab that you see on a portfolio level is suggesting how each scheme that is there in the portfolio is individually contributing to generate the portfolio return. Attribution analysis then becomes a part of a single fund's portfolio.
Okay. So when we see a single fund, what we will be able to see is what are the holdings in that fund,
Yes,
and
that is
what is the
correct.
percentage allocation. So
Correct.
that is
And
the information that we will be able to see. So we will
correct.
not be able to see uh, how each fund is performing or contributing in that fund. Correct?
That is correct. We show the month end holding, the data that is publicly available. That is what we show in terms of this position over time.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, on the same line, another question. What
Yeah.
is the need for me to see by a particular stock they increased or decreased? With that data, what am I going to do?
Yeah, right. So it will typically let you see towards which stock or towards which sector the fund, or for that matter, the category is bullish at. Right. So I highlighted that once I just loaded mid cap as a category here, we were able to see that mid cap as a fund were increasing their allocation into IT software as a sector. So they are increasing their uh, allocations towards this respective sector, while we also looked upon auto ancillary. So they were pulling out of these sectors. So suggesting this data will suggest how are mid cap funds moving towards their stock allocations, how are the changes that they are doing on a month on month basis. Any more questions, please let us know.
If there is no more questions, you can just wind up.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you all for joining in. You could anytime visit our YouTube page. So, we have a dedicated playlist for all the webinars that have been conducted up until now. Today's webinar will also be uploaded by next week. A total of 147 videos have been uploaded. Thank you all for joining in. Hope to see you again next week with a new topic. Thank you.